You and I are in a monthly girls' supper club.
Yes.
And we meet first Tuesday of every month.
Right.
So to replicate the evening that we have together, don't get scared. I asked my son Matt to pick up your favorite libation, which I just happen to know is red wine. Bring in the wine, son Matthew.
Thank you. Oh, that's my surprise.
That's your surprise.
Thank you. Could have used that about an hour ago.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is the This is the first.
Can we drink?
This is a first. Yes,
This is absolutely a first.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. Here we go.
So let's start at the beginning, Vicki. Your father was in the Air Force, stationed in Great Britain during World War II, where he met. No,
after World War II. 1951 or 2.
1951, where he met your mother, and she was a Brit.
Yep.
Do you know the story of how they met?
Yes. Her friend, because they were young girls, her friend's father owned a tea shop and tea and coffee. And the GIs would come in for coffee. And so my mom's friend was dating one of the GIs, and she said to my mom, "You really need to come here and meet a you need to come here. We got someone for you."
So she wasn't working there. Her friend was working there?
Her friend's father owned it.
Ah.
And so my mom, she was probably 16.
Wow.
Yeah. They get out of school at 16 over there unless you go to college. So she was already out of school working. So she went to this little tea shop, met my dad, and that's kind of how they met.
How long did they date before they married?
I think about a year and a half. And my grandmother, very British lady, said to my father, "You're not taking her to America unless you marry her."
How many brothers and sisters did your mother have?
Just a sister, one sister.
And so did she marry a GI?
No. Mm-mm.
So your grandmother got to keep one daughter?
One daughter. And actually, during World War II, my grandmother's husband, my granddad was killed in World War II, and she took care of the German prisoners, and she dated the GIs that were over there in World War II.
So your grandmother was a nurse during World War II?
Yeah.
And she cared for the German prisoners that were wounded, and she dated GIs?
Yeah. But she wouldn't marry one because she didn't want to come to America.
She wouldn't marry a GI. And she'd already had the both of you. I mean, the both of your aunt and grandmother.
Mom. Yeah, and during the Blitz, when they were pounding.
What's a Blitz?
Well, the Blitz, I forgot what year it started. It's when Germany started pounding England. They really pounded London. It was called the Blitz. And so my mom...
With bombing.
Like bomb. They just bombed the heck out of London. I forgot what year. But what they would do is they would pass over. My mom lived on a little coastal town. And whatever bombs they didn't drop in London, they'd pop it off on her town on the way back to Germany because they were right there on a channel.
And why would they do that?
Just getting rid of their ordnance. Just bomb more people. They were going back over to Germany, so they didn't want to bring any more bombs back with them.
So the Germans were doing a bombing raids.
Oh, it was terrible.
On London. And your mother lived outside of London. How old was she when this was going on?
She was 4 or 5 years old. And then, as a matter of fact, her father was killed. He was a carpenter, so they kept the carpenters and those folks so they could be rebuilding. That everything was getting blown up.
So he didn't join the service?
No, they wanted him to rebuild things.
In the infrastructure.
Right. And so he actually, a bomb landed as he was out trying to get these old people into a shelter, and it killed him. And my grandmother was 25 years old.
And had probably 4-year-olds.
And she had a 4-year-old, and a 5-year-old. And then after that, my mom, and you've probably heard the stories about the children who were evacuated.
No.
You haven't heard about that? Okay. Oh, so anyway, they evacuated all these school children from these coastal areas because they were getting bombed as well. So they would send them to the interior part of England because the Germans had nothing over there. Because they were bombing the seaports, they were bombing London. So my mother and her sister, with all the little school children, went with their teachers, were put on a train with a little tag, and taken out into the countryside in Somerset, which is pretty far inland, and taken to a church, and the people in the village would come and pick up the children that they wanted. And my mom and her sister were the last two because nobody wanted 2 girls. They wanted boys to work on a farm because it's agriculture. So my mom and her sister were the last to get
And they
picked.
foster parented them.
For a year. For a year, she never saw her mother. And she had just lost her father. Yeah. So that was terrible.
What did your mother do during that time? Work as a nurse?
No, my mom was a child. But
I'm sorry, your grandmother.
My grandmother, she wasn't really a nurse, but her job, everybody in England had to do something. So she was called in what they called the land army. And so what they did, they took care of the prisoners, they planted trees, just to rebuild England. And she did that, oh gosh, for about 2 or 3 years.
What was your grandmother like after living through all of that? Was she bitter?
No, she was a very well-educated woman. She worked her entire life.
She ever remarry?
Yes, she did. About 14 years later, she married my grandfather. Yeah, a Londoner. My granddad was from London. And so she had to move around a lot because she had to live with relatives because she didn't have much money. And she had these 2 little girls. And so my mom told me one story. They lived above a fish and chip shop. Her brother owned a fish and chip shop. And she said that, they got to eat all the fish and chips she's ever wanted. And they would just move. And finally they moved back to Ramsgate, where she was from.
And your mother, not your grandmother, but your actual mother, what did she say about those years that she and her sister, at least they didn't get separated, they got to go together?
They got to go together.
So what did she say about those years, and how did that affect her later?
I think she had PTSD. I think all her life she had PTSD. I think it really affected my mom.
In what ways?
She was very anxious in her entire life. Just very anxious, worried all the time.
She leave the house?
Oh, yeah. She wasn't agoraphobic. No. I don't know exactly.
But she's got Alzheimer's now. Let's just go forward.
She does.
And one of the ways she has PTSD is her behavior at the memory center, right?
Yeah.
Tell our listeners what she does.
Oh, well, I was there today. They were celebrating Christmas. And now my mom's pretty far into her Alzheimer's travel. She's probably, if you're going from a scale of 1 to 10, my mom's probably about an 8. But she's ambulatory. She can walk. She can feed herself. But she doesn't know who she is. She doesn't know who I am. She doesn't know anybody. But she likes to eat everything, whether it's a decoration or...
She's going to eat the artificial grapes?
Yes.
But doesn't she think there's a bomb going off? Doesn't she still... Isn't her PTSD come out because she thinks that you need to be taking cover? I thought I heard you say that one
That was
day.
my grandmother. My grandmother was always frightened. Especially if my grandmother was visiting me here in Arkansas, if the tornado sirens go off, it sounds just like an air raid. And my poor grandmother would just go berserk.
She had PTSD.
She did as well.
I guess everybody has PTSD. I mean, you go through something like that, that we just never really gave it a name. I think in World War II, they used to call it shell-shocked.
Yeah.
I think they should join the YouTube channel for Up in Your Business so they never miss anything. And then they can get the highlights after the show's over with.
And they can look at all the funny faces we make the whole time.
Yeah, because you get all the behind-the-scenes stuff. So I would say subscribe to the YouTube channel. If it were I may have to change that script.